You hear the difference? It's not, here, God, you can have this. It's, God, I'm going to. That's what Corbin was. And what happened is these guys were supposed to take care of their parents, and their parents started getting old, and their parents started getting fruity, and their parents are starting to, need depends and things like that. Hey, dude, it's not funny. So I haven't had that happen yet. So I already told my mom I'll just let her go for a walk. Forever. So she told me to. But see, they promised something to God. It's like promise, God, when I die, I will give this to you. But the reason that they did it wasn't to honor God. It was so that they didn't have to take care of their parents. I'll give you an example from my own life. I don't know if you know this, but do you know that when you pray, things happen? Did you guys know that? I've experienced that a lot in my life, so much so that even when I wasn't living for God, when I was in high school, I had a friend, his name was Brandon. And Brandon would say, Jeremy, dude, I need to not be in my house. See, Brandon didn't live in a good home. His dad used to hit him. My friend Brandon came from a home and he was hit. And I don't know if you have a friend that's that way, but it's when you're in high school and your friend's getting hit and you don't know what to do. And I remember once, this is the circumstances, Brandon loved his dad like crazy, and I remember my other friend, Brandon, came in one day and he had this bruise. His entire forearm, his torn bicep right here was covered in a bruise. And my other friend, Rob, is just like, dude, we're going to kill your dad. And he's just trying to defend his friend. And Brandon jumps him in the middle of the hallway at school and just starts beating him up. That's my dad. How do you help a friend like that? But here's the thing about Brandon is Brandon, even though I wasn't serving God, Brandon understood something. He understood that when I prayed, things happened. And he's like, Jeremy, I want to stay the night at your house this Friday night. My dad said, no, can you pray? And here's what's crazy. I'm not serving God, and I would pray, and guess what would happen? Brandon would spend the night at my house on Friday night. And the lips without the heart, here's what happened. As I remember, Brandon asked me once to pray, and I was like, yeah, dude, I prayed, and I didn't pray. And he's like, I swear to God. And I was like, I swear to God. And I lied to him. And then later on, I told him, and dude, it about wrecked my friendship. And here is the issue that I'm trying to illustrate is this, is I made a promise that was self-serving. It wasn't a real promise. It was just a promise to get what I wanted. It was fake. It was hypocritical. It was fake. It had nothing to do with anything. That's what's happening. How is this about worship? How is this about worship? Jesus uses this as the illustration to talk about you honor me with your lips and yet your heart is far from me. Jesus is saying this. I'm tired of promises that you don't intend to keep. I'm tired of promises that have nothing to do with me, but are always about you. God, I promise, if you give me that girl, I'll do this. God, if you help me get an A on this test, God, I promise next week I'll read my Bible 5 times. I don't know about you. Those were just some of the dumb things that I did. And it had nothing to do with it. How does all of this have to do with worship? They kept the traditions of men at the cost of neglecting God. It's not just the act that shows. It's not just with our lips. It's not just the word. It's really from our heart. In Mark, this verse that we read already, Mark 7, 6-8 says this. He replied, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites. As it is written, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are but rules taught by men, and they have let go of the commands of God and are holding on to the traditions of men. This scripture is weighty. It's incredibly weighty to me. What does it mean to do something in vain? Self-absorbed? It's all about me, and did I mention me? How many ever heard that really old song, You're So Vain? You ever heard that song? And it's like, you're so vain, I bet you think the song is about you. The song was written before I was born. I thought it was about me. Right? He's saying you worship me in vain, but it's also, I think it's not just in vain, it's about me, but I think it's also worthless. It's like your parents giving you this brand new, I'll talk your language. They give you a brand new scooter, a brand new bike, and they're like, hey, look what I got you. And then you're like, yeah. They let you open it, and then they put it in a trash compactor and crush it to nothing and make you watch. That is a great definition of vain. And Jesus says this, Jesus speaking, he says, he's quoting Isaiah, and he says, you worship me like that. You worship me in vain. You worship me in vain. It's hypocrisy. Does anybody, I asked this question already, but does anybody know a hypocrite? Somebody that doesn't just once in a while act like a hypocrite, but is consistently hypocritical. Do you know somebody like that? How many of you think really, really highly about those kind of people? You're just like, dude, I want that person to be back in me. You're like, I want that. Why? Why? What Jesus is saying is that that's what we're doing. Matthew 5:13, listen to this, please. Matthew 5:13, he says, you are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled by men. In the Luke translation of this exact reading, it actually says this, it's not even good enough to be put on the manure pile. And in the contextually and all these things, I can go into how salt can actually lose its saltiness. It doesn't matter, but in their culture, salt wasn't just salt. It was the white powder that they dried from the sea. It had more than just salt in it. The first thing to go when moisture came into contact with it at all was the salt. The salt would come out of it, and so it was just white powder. Guess what they paved their roads with? The white powder. The white powder. So with that white powder, not only that, but how many of you, again, we already said this, how many of you know somebody that's consistently hypocritical? How many of you think really highly of them? We don't. We already said that. And they, you know what? Their whole reputation is trampled by men. Jesus is saying this, but here's what's crazy. Listen to this. Does he say if you want to be, you are the salt of the earth? Does he say if you are saved, you are the salt of the earth? No, there's no if in this. He says you are the salt of the earth. So the reality is either we are shining or being salt, or we are being hypocrites. We are. We can say we are serving God with our words and not serve him with what we do. And Jesus says that will be thrown out and trampled by men. Serving God or worshiping God must be more than just saying we do. Can I tell you something about our worship team? They come up here and they sing to you. Can I tell you the thing that I know about the team that stands up in front of you? The reason that we allow them to stand up here is not because they just can play the guitar. But we have accountability around them so that they're reading their Bibles, so that they're praying, so that they're being in right relationship with Jesus Christ, so that they're trying to grow. Are they perfect? No. They're not. They work with me. They're not perfect. That wasn't a bash on them. That's saying I'm not perfect. And I teach them some dumb things sometimes. I try my best. And what I'm getting at, guys, is this, is that worship must be more than we do. It's not just that they can play their guitar. It's that they have a life that's in pursuit. It's not just what they say. It's more than just what you see when they come up on stage. Because the accountability that they have is more than just when they're up here. It's not just on Wednesday night. It's on Monday and Tuesday. Nick in his song said that. It's not just Sunday. It's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday too. Do we sing the songs? Do we live the songs we sing? Back in verse 6, it says it's more than just what's said. I want to look at how the Message translation reads this. Mark 7, 6 through 8 in the Message says this. Jesus answered, Isaiah was right about you frauds. Hit the bullseye, in fact. These people make a big show of saying the right thing, but their heart isn't in it. They act like they worship me. They don't mean it. They just use me as a cover for teaching whatever suits their fancy, ditching God's commands to take up the latest fad. They act like they worship. Guys, this is not a nice sermon tonight. I love you.